recording of Dale E. Wilcox of 525 Mimosa, Zephyrhills, Florida, 34248. Dale's phone number is 813-788-5156. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw from the Oldsmobile History Center on January 27th, 1989 at Dale's home in Zephyrhills. This is tape number 1 of 3 tapes. Dale, if you could just give us your name, address, and phone number, please.
Okay, I'm Dale Wilcox. I live at 525 Mimosa Street in Zephyrhills, Florida. My phone number is 788-5156 in area code 813.
What's your zip code down here, Dale? I shouldn't have asked that.
Yeah,
that's okay. Don't worry, I'll get it off your thing.
Yeah, it's
okay.
24. I can't remember now.
That's all right. I shouldn't have asked. Take me back to when you started, Dale, at Oldsmobile, and what you were doing and what was going on.
My first job at Oldsmobile was working for a foreman by the name of Harlan Leaphart in the engine plant.
Okay.
In small parts, we assembled fuel pumps, installing the shafts, putting the gears on the end, and putting a plate on the top of them, and then running them through a tester to make sure that the thing wasn't noisy.
Fuel pump.
And did it pump.
Isn't that something?
Oil pump.
Oh, excuse me, oil pump.
Yeah, an oil pump.
Okay, all right.
And
when was
that was in 1949.
All right.
I worked for him, I can't remember for how long.
That's okay.
And then went to the axle plant, where I did many different things.
See, now, Dale, was that on the new rocket engine at that time, or was that on the old 6?
That was on the old engine.
Okay.
Because the rocket engine didn't come out until, I believe, 1950.
49. It was 49,
was
yeah.
it? Well, and that very well could have been, because it was late in 49.
It was.
So it very well could have been. My memory wasn't too great, being a new man
right.
in the plant at that time.
Do you remember where you were in the plant?
Yeah, it was up in the northwest corner of Building 36.
Okay. There must have been some offices up there near you somewhere.
Yes, the offices were about where they were when I retired, up in the north end to the east of that area.
Right.
But there was a small area in that corner, probably took up 1 bay wide and maybe 4 or 5 bays long. I think part of the area that I worked in at that time is the last time I was there. They were used to hang engines and into the box cars.
Oh, shipping area.
Transfer area.
Yeah.
And to the east of it was a dress-up line for the engines, where a bunch of ladies working on, I can't remember all the things they did
sure.
there, spark plug wires and what have you, they put on over in there. But that was right up in that corner. I think there's some restrooms right there too.
And the elevator was kind of kitty corner across from you there somewhere, perhaps.
Yes, yeah, sure was. That was my first assignment at Oldsmobile. While I was working I worked in the, like I said, in the axle plant for a short time, running a hobbing machine and machining a variety of parts.
This would have been on like axle shafts, or?
No, smaller parts. That was part of the axle plant, but not all of the parts that you worked on weren't necessarily a part of the axle assembly.
Okay.
Some of them were too.
That was up
Carter,
like 21 maybe? Building 21?
Carter was a superintendent up there.
Okay, that would have been Ray Carter.
Rex's uncle.
Okay.
One thing I remember, they were having trouble with a machine up there one time, and I thought it was terribly funny. The job that they wanted, of course, every time you had trouble with a machine, it was always something that they needed yesterday. And so Carter, and I can't remember several others at that level came out there, and machine repair and plumbers and everything were working on that machine, and they'd taken the back off from it and were messing around, and the guys let a yell out of them for me to go ahead and cycle the machine, and when I did, one of the hydraulic lines broke.
Oh no.
And of course those fellas really got showered. Well, of course I thought it was terribly funny, but
They probably didn't appreciate that.
No. And I'm sure they all had to go home and change their clothes because they really got showered with it. But anyway, I worked there for just an incident that.
Yeah.
Then I went from there.
Hey, Dale, excuse me for interrupting. Do you remember what you hired in that salary or hourly wage at?
I don't now.
Okay.
I don't now. No,
just
I don't.
Curious, just for perspective.
I think it was over $1 an hour, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Excuse the interruption.
Okay.
Go ahead.
While I was working in the axle plant, I was playing softball, and I got a shoulder separation.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do the job that they had for me there because I was in a harness. You know, I couldn't get my arms in front of me.
Oh my.
So guess what? Well, I got shelved to final assembly.
Oh, great.
And I was putting climbing up in the back of the trunk, which didn't bother me. And by turning and taking one hand, I'd hold that tail light assembly on there while another fellow put the screws to it, tighten it in there, and then put the frame on it. Did that for a while.
Okay. And that was up on the second floor.
Yes.
Of the car
Yes.
plant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right after the bodies come in out of the body float.
Oh, right across the bridge there.
What was the fellow's name I worked for up there? Real nice guy. He really was. And then later on, I had various jobs up there.
So you stayed in the car assembly plant for a longer period of time?
No, I wasn't there terribly long because I got terribly unhappy there and I quit.
Oh.
And I was gone about 6 months. I went back to the job, a small job shop that I'd had previously.
Okay.
They'd been bugging me to come back, and I knew the fellow that run the place pretty well, and so I was looking a way to get out of final assembly and thought maybe that would be the answer. It didn't work out that way.
Okay.
And
do you remember when you left?
I don't remember just exactly when I was left. It must have been I was gone about 6 months, and I came back in September of, so I'm going to say February or March of 1951.
Okay. So you were there sort of 2 years.
Yeah,
doing
something
the
like that.
production
These
stuff.
might not
that's
be
all
just
right. No,
exactly
just for
right dates.
perspective,
Yes.
So we can kind of...
And because I do remember I came back in September because I wasn't satisfied after I went back to that other shop after working at Oldsmobile. The place that I did work was a small shop, Woolert Corporation.
Oh, yeah.
You may know who they are. They supplied rings and stuff for us there. Had absolutely no safety program, and after being at Oldsmobile for a short period of time, and they were always so safety conscious and on to us for safety items and this sort of thing that I was just a little afraid of the machinery and everything else that I was working with then.
So our safety program at the plant was fairly significant at that point.
Oh yes, very good. Yeah, I think the fellow that was in there before Don Brainerd, Stone.
J.R. Stone.
Stone was directing it then, and then after he retired, Don Brainerd took over.
But we had you were wearing safety glasses.
Oh yes.
And
safety glasses were must.
Guards and all that.
The ladies at that time all had to wear those caps, keep their hair underneath those. You know, remember the long hair?
Sure. Yeah.
And safety glasses, safety shoes. Of course, they never forced you to wear safety shoes, but they always recommended it. Their guarding program was good. It got better, but at that time it was a good program.
How about what can you remember cleanliness in the plant? How that was in those late 40s, 50s?
Probably better than it got later on.
Oh really?
Oh yeah. They had, I think, management at that time had a better control. I got to be careful what I say here, but I think due to, we lost a lot of control in the plant over the years due to union.
Yeah.
I think that's no big secret to
No,
anybody.
no.
It got to the point of where it was terribly hard to discipline people because you just had a big battle with union every time you did. But we back then, I think the plant was terribly clean.
Even like when you were doing the oil pump thing down there.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Reasonably.
One of the things that they insisted on, that well they come right out and tell you, hey, you know, if you, that's part of the job, is making sure that workstation is just as clean or cleaner when you leave it as when you found it.
Okay.
And if it took you 10 minutes to do it after the whistle blow, that was part of your job assignment.
Well, that's interesting.
You did it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And well, anyway, then I came back to, when I came back to Oldsmobile, I came into Building 34.
All right.
Which, you know, was small. At that time was drill presses and welders, spot welders, small presses, small automatic presses. Mel DeLong had the heavier stuff and the old baler that used to be down in there.
Okay.
Howard Gruitt,
Okay.
at that time I believe was a foreman in the middle group, and Bill Cahoon had all of the small welders and stuff in the north end.
All right.
At one time or another, I worked for all of them. Mostly, I worked for Bill Cahoon on the welders and the drill presses and the assembly fixtures and this sort of thing. And filled in in the middle group there on the small presses from time to time.
Now those were all generally just single-purpose things, weren't they?
Yes.
Dale? Just little bitty jobs, small parts.
You might take a slug of some kind, put a form into it of some kind, you know. In that time span, Harold Burhoff was, I don't remember if Harold was in there. Yeah, Harold Burhoff was the general foreman there when I went in there. Harold was a sticker for housekeeping.
Okay.
He would come and get one of the supervisors from the far end of the building and carry him to the other end of the building to show him that somebody had dropped a 2x4 along the aisle somewhere.
No kidding.
And he wanted it picked up now.
Okay.
And so it made not only the supervisors, but all of the hourly people that worked under Harold Boroff knew that if you drop something on the floor, you better get it picked up before he comes along, or he'd ask you why it was there.
So he did spend a lot of time just circulating, so to speak.
Yeah. He was a circulator, and he was on the floor a lot of the time. And like I say, his one big pet peeve was housekeeping. And
was there a lot of push, Dale, for quantity at all? Was that in there? Was that pushed?
Oh yes, yeah. We all had quotas we had to make. You know, you had every machine, every operation on every machine. You had an hourly rate that you had to make, unless you had trouble, of course.
Yeah.
Most of them were generous enough so that if a fella didn't have any problem, and after he got a little more adept at the work, could probably get that hour's work out even on a tough job in 50 minutes, you know.
So he had a little extra time at either the end of the day or sometime there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it gave him a little more break time, or you know.
Now, were you relieved in those press operations,
Not
or
then.
did you do your own, so to speak?
The only time that we would get relieved, if they would have a job that was a hot job, so-called, you know.
Okay.
If you had a line of presses where there was 3 or 4 people working together, and they wanted to keep that line going, well, then someone would relieve that line. But normally, no, that was not.
If you had to go to the boys' room, you just went, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Your restroom or anything else, you kind of made your own time.
Yeah.
And usually, to keep control on the thing, if you went to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, you knew that at 9 o'clock in the morning you could have I think at that time it was a 18-minute break or something. And then you worked on till lunchtime when you had your half-hour break, and then you'd work a couple more hours in the afternoon and get an 18-minute break again, or 16, or whatever it happened to be. It just seems to me 18 minutes was about what it was. And in order to control that thing, why, so that people weren't wandering all over the place at any given time, why they insisted that you take your break whenever the group did, or
that window,
the department.
whenever that was.
Yes.
Okay.
And then any other time that you were away from your machine, if anyone questioned you, you better let them know. You know, you had to have let them know why you're doing.
Almost like a pass, huh?
Yeah. Well, it was, you know, if you had an emergency, or restroom run or something like that, or going to go get a drink of water, and you know, they wouldn't normally bother you unless you were wandering away too far, as long as you were making your rate for the day. You know.
Do you ever remember shutting down because it was too hot or too cold, or any of those kinds of things?
There was a few times, and I can't remember what year there was, that in the summertime when they shut the plant down, because it got
was too hot,
too hot to work. You know?
Unbearable.
And because it was too cold, no.
Okay, never that side.
The big storms, we of course kept everybody out, but never because it was too cold in the plant. You could always put clothes on, but it's pretty hard to take them off
once
when
you
it's
get
too
to your
warm.
shirt.
I don't think it happened maybe a time or two in my, and I can't be specific on that, but I know it did happen. And of course, when you had that type of weather up there, your absenteeism was terribly high anyway, so that probably was smart for them to shut down anyway. So go home.
Now, how long did you stay then working there in the 34 area?
I was in there 7 years.
Okay.
And then I started, of course, from a machine operator or press operator, I guess I was classified at. I eventually was a job setter.
Okay, what did a job setter do?
A job setter did a multitude of things. Like welders, you had to maintain the points and the
filing and
the changing of points
tips.
and taking care of the drill presses, changing drills, and readjusting fixtures and this type of thing that wasn't necessarily fixture repair work. You know, it was did some die setting on the small presses.
How did you know what to go do?
Well, that was anything that had to be done, like in that small machine group up there, was my job. If that job wasn't running, or it wasn't running properly, it was my job to make sure that it got running that way. But whether I did it or whether I got the proper people to do it. Okay.
Would the guy that's running the drill press, for example, would he flag you down? Or
yes.
Is that
He might tell me that the drill was dull, or the machine had kicked out, or the hole was out of round, or maybe the floor inspector would come and tell me, hey, the specifications aren't right in it. You've got to get it back, and that was my job as a job setter to do that.
Now, did you have the whole building, or did you?
I had one department.
You were one. Like
as I recall, it was 2001, Group 1.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
I'm sure that's what it was. They had Group 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 4, although it was included in. 4 came into play after they built Building 37 out there.
Oh, all right. Oh, that's right. 37 wasn't there yet,
37 was not there early.
All those little buildings were out there.
Yes, yeah. All right. They tore them down and built that gun plant in there.
Tell me about the baler at that time.
The old baler.
Yeah, where was it?
It sat down in the southwest corner of Building 34.
All right.
At one time, about half or 2/3 of it was uncovered.
Outdoors?
Yeah, part of it was outdoors.
All right. So that must have been it actually stuck out the west side of the building?
Yes, yes.
Right.
Okay. And when they built 37 in there, that covered the whole thing.
All right. Where did the bales go?
The bales came out, they put the scrap into the south end of the baler,
All right.
and it come through, come up an elevator, and dropped onto a platform on the, please. Would you like iced tea?
No.
Oh, she may get you one.
Well, that's okay.
The bales come up there, and then they picked them up with a hoist and put them onto a wagon,
Right.
a big, heavy, iron-wheeled wagon,
Yeah.
and pulled them outside behind Building 40. And I don't know if you recall, but along Building 40 to the east and north of Building 56 or 50 in the die room area, they used to have a bunch of pits out there.
Oh yes, and a crane over
And a
there.
crane.
Yeah.
And they used to take them out there, and the crane would pick them up with a magnet and drop them in different,
Okay.
depending on what it was baled, the different types of bale, whether it was, they tried to keep all regular steel separate from turn plate or from stainless steel.
Yeah, keep the kind
Yeah,
segregated.
right. They kept it apart.
Okay.
So when they took it out there, that crane operator out there would put that in those different bends according to what it was.
Now, then the baler never dumped material to the west then, towards the old buildings to the west of the building.
It may have at the time that, and I'm thinking that perhaps they did at the time that when part of it was in the open. I think maybe
All right.
that came out and it dumped it out into where Building 37
right.
was eventually.
All right, so maybe it did go out there to the
Yeah,
west.
I don't remember, but
All right.
it just seems that it did, Jim.
Well, I have a picture that looks like that,
Yeah.
but I wasn't able to quite identify
Yeah,
it.
and I'm sure that's what happened. They put it in, come in, and it come out that, when it dropped into that elevator, it went out to the west.
Yeah. Mhm.
And,
Okay.
thank you.
So we had more than one baler, did we, down in there to start with?
Just
the one.
Just that one. And
Okay.
it was an old baler. It took a lot of maintenance. They used to run it around the clock. That was one job that always had 3 shifts on it.
It did. Was the press shop running 3 shifts, or was that?
No, it was just that they had so much that old baler couldn't handle everything.
Yeah.
And there was times when that baler would break down and would be down for several hours, and that's the scrap and trimmings and stuff off the hoods and the fenders and the filler plates and that type of thing would pile up so badly that they would back trucks in there from Simon's or some of those places and haul it out of there.
Okay.
Because but if the thing was running, that baler could handle what we would accumulate in 2 shifts. They could bale in 3.
Did the bale or the material from the presses come in big wagons? How did it get there?
They had 4-wheeled wagons, probably 3.5 foot wide by maybe 10 foot long.
Okay.
And they had a man or men that had these little, I always used to call them little Johnny wagons, but they were just nothing more than a little cat. And they'd go around and pull those wagons from the different press areas to the baler.
Okay, like a tugger of some kind.
Yes.
Yeah.
And eventually, of course, they put a lot of underground scrap conveyors in there.
That was a little later, though.
Yes. That was quite a lot later.
Yeah. In the 50s, when you were there initially, where were all of the fenders and hoods and all those things made? This is before 37 now, before 37 was built.
In Building 56, clear to the east end, the die room was clear to the east end of Building 56, or 50, I guess that.
56, that's all
and
right.
then there was a Building 50 that went down, a little down where first aid was.
Yeah.
Then they had some presses in there where they where they made the old filler plates, the old fender fillers.
When they were making steel ones.
Yes, they were making steel ones at that
Okay.
time.
Those were sort of right inside that big door south of 40, weren't they?
Yes, yeah, sure.
All right.
That's right. You come in that big door
Yeah.
from the Building 40 alley, we
Yeah,
called it.
right.
In those doors, and right to the right there, as you were heading south, was the old filler plate line.
All right.
Along in there, you also had the fender line,
Okay.
and then the hood line was further on down yet than
Further
that.
to the west of that.
Yeah.
All right.
About where they are today, I guess.
Sort
They were
of,
still in there.
Yeah. All right.
It was arranged a little different,
Yeah.
but they made most
Yeah.
of those right there in Building 56. Building 52 at that time did all of the medium type press. They made bumper brackets. I'm trying to think of some of the things that they made out there. The old stainless steel line in there for the trim on the cars.
Okay. Moldings, that kind of
Moldings
stuff?
and that
All
type
right.
of thing was
Yeah.
made in Building 52.
Oil
Oil pans.
Okay.
Oil pans were made there. They had that metal polisher for the bumpers were made out in 52.
Okay.
Remember they
Yeah,
had the old
yeah,
polisher
yeah,
back there in
yeah.
the south
Okay, that-
east corner
that
of
low
Building
bay.
52. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
They had that. They used to bring the bumper
The flat
steel in
stock.
there.
Yeah, it was all a flat stock polish.
They put it through the polisher and waxed it before it went into the bumper line.
Okay. We didn't have any plastics machines.
No plastic machines at all at that time.
And nobody had heard of the sheet molding compound or SLC or any of that
that was all.
stuff. That was much later.
Yeah.
All right.
That came
so
in.
we were all sheet iron.
Everything was sheet metal at that time.
Okay.
And although I eventually wound up into plastics, I was the first one to ridicule it when I first heard about it. Never going to work.
Not going to work, right? They're all plastic. Oh, well, what the heck. Okay.
But
Now, let's see. Then you were in the small press shop for 7 or 8 years. 7 years
yeah,
or so.
about
All right.
I was in there pretty much all the time until 58 or so, and then of course at that time they had what they call group leaders,
Okay.
head of this foreman deal.
All right.
I think about 57 maybe I started as a group leader as well as job setting.
Okay.
When I first started that, I would take like Bill Freeman's place when he went on vacation or he was
Okay.
off.
All right.
Then, after I got used to doing that, why then I would take care of, go down and take Howard Gruett's place maybe.
So you would move to another group,
Yes,
another
yeah.
department.
And then I'd replace both of those foremen. And then next thing you know, you're replacing all the foremen in the building.
Right.
Because you got to know all of
Yeah.
the jobs and the people and that thing. And then about, I think 59 or so, they started using me in Building 52 and around in other areas, you know.
Okay. Do you remember who the superintendent was in their first?
When I first went in there, for a short period of time was, let's see, Bob Cook was the general superintendent, and not Slacta. The man that was the superintendent in there had Bill Freeman. Bill Freeman came in there while I was there.
Okay.
The other man was there just a short period of time. I can't remember what his name was.
Okay, that's all right.
Of course, I got on the end of my tongue too. But anyway, Bill Freeman was in there as the
Okay.
superintendent, and he had the day shift. At that time, they had just one assistant superintendent, and that was Dick Monroe on the afternoon shift.
Oh, all right.
And
Then Bill was on the day shift, so to speak.
Bill was the day shift,
And Monroe was
Monroe
on
on the afternoon shift.
All right.
And that was the extent of the. Everything else was general foreman.
Okay.
I was trying to think who. Tom Spalsbury was a general foreman.
Okay.
Jerry Shumway Harold Boroff. Sure, there was others, but I can't remember right now.
That's all right. What do you remember about Bill Freeman, Dale?
Bill Freeman was a nice guy. He really was. I liked Bill Freeman. I liked working for him. He was. Everyone always used to make big jokes about him because he was a bird watcher.
Sure, yeah, knew that.
And the pigeons would always get into the buildings out there in 52 and 56 through those high bays when you open up them windows. And there was always somebody had a slingshot or something that was trying to knock them pigeons down. And Bill Freeman was not very fond of anybody that was after a bird of any kind.
Even if it was an old pigeon.
That's right, and the pigeon, or even if it was crapping all over his cap, he still wouldn't care, you know. And but Bill was a good guy.
Back on.
And
how did Bill manage the organization, Dale? Do you remember that? What was his approach?
I honestly, he was the type of man that believed that once he appointed a supervisor or a general supervisor, that he was pretty sure that he was ready to do the job, and he left him pretty much well alone unless you got in trouble or something and needed help, you know, and then he'd come and help you. But he kind of took a. Bill was always kind of a low-key superintendent.
Okay. Did he have regular get-togethers with his people?
Oh yes, yeah. We had. They always had, as far back as I can remember, the general foreman had daily meetings with him.
Okay.
He had. He was probably one of the first that had really an open door policy with his supervisors. You didn't have to be afraid to step through his door and speak to him anytime.
Okay.
You know?
So he was an approachable person.
Yes, yes. But he was very set in his ways too.
Okay.
In this respect, that if he made up his mind he wanted something done a certain way, that's the way it better be done. You know. And but all in all, he wasn't a bad guy to work for.
Well, a lot of these people, see, we don't, and people won't know anything about, and they'll have heard about this individual, and of course we can't talk to him, and so trying to find out what we can about each one of these kinds of
somewhere things. I have I think when Bill retired, I couldn't find that either, but it's here somewhere. It was a write-up that was in the paper probably. But Bill was a nice guy, and Dick Monroe probably did more to help me in my career at Oldsmobile than any one single person.
Okay, how come? What did he do?
Dick was the type of guy that always had time, or always took the time, to sit down and talk to you. To give you advice, good advice. Sometimes solicited, sometimes not. If he could see that you were doing something not necessarily wrong, but were getting off the track. He wasn't the type of guy that come and light in the middle of your back with both feet. He might tell you at the time, now here's what you got to do it right, but sometime before the shift ended, Dick Monroe would have me in the office, and he would say, okay, now here is where you were going wrong.
Okay.
Here is the way that you should be doing it.
All right.
I can remember he told me one time I was getting terribly frustrated because I wasn't, this was when I was a new supervisor.
Okay.
This was after I went on supervision.
Yeah.
I was a new supervisor and frustrated because I wasn't getting things done the way I wanted them to do. And Dick called me in the office and him sit down and he said, come on, let's have a cup of coffee. You know, we sit down over a cup of coffee and got to talking about what the problem was and all that. And he told me, he said, well, I'll tell you one thing. You cannot expect, never expect anyone to do the job as well as you would do it.
Okay.
And I couldn't understand that. I figured that I was always felt that I was pretty much of a sticker for getting the job done, doing it right, you know. And actually, he was giving me a left-handed compliment.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because he knew the type of person and the type of work that I had done, and he come right out and told me, so that's the reason that you were eventually made a supervisor, was because of the type of work you did on the floor.
Yeah.
But you can't expect everybody to do that kind of work. And once you learn that each individual out there is different, it's going to be a whole lot easier on yourself. Well, I probably got rid of a few ulcers that night.
Well, at least he was appreciative of the problem.
Yeah. Well, you know, you always said there's only about 2 or 3 inches between the pat on the back and the kick in the butt, you know, and you got to know which to do and when to do it, you know. And but Dick was a real. He wasn't a terribly hard-working fellow, but he certainly was a good manager, you know. And I think everyone kind of felt about Dick Monroe like I did. There was nothing that Dick Monroe wanted done that somebody wouldn't really try to get done for him. He was that was just the type of fellow he was.
And he just stayed on the night shift forever, so to speak.
Yeah, he sure did. Yeah, I think he liked it because he could use his low-key approach out there. You know, he was Dick was never a real gung-ho person. He just that wasn't that wasn't his style of management. I don't remember in the several years that I worked around Dick Monroe, only maybe a time or two that he ever raised his voice. You know,
isn't it interesting?
And it's it really is when I stop and think about it. And I've thought about this often. I've seen the time when Bill Freeman was there that Bill get pretty excited sometimes. You know, things weren't going his way. But Dick was a good guy. And then of course, I'm going up through management, the guys that I worked for.
That's all right.
Tom Spalsbury used to have an old rough and tumble reputation out there, you know. Tom was the type of guy that always had a chaw of snuff in his bottom lip, and
he's going to
walked around there. Yeah, you know, he walked around there with an iron club, boy, and I'll tell you, well, I didn't work for Tom for a long time, but I'd heard about him by reputation. And Bill Freeman called me in the office one day, and he said, they've got some problems out on a line out here in Building 52. We'd like to go out there and we're gonna put some different change some foremans around, see if that doesn't help. And he said, you're going to be working for Tom Spalsbury. And boy, I'll tell you, my heart dropped right in my stomach. And I thought, boy, of all the people I got to go work for, it's Tom Spalsbury.
Yeah.
But you know that Tom Spalsbury turned out to be one of the best general foremen I ever worked for.
No kidding. Isn't that something? His reputation just preceded.
Yeah, well, I think I was listening to people that perhaps weren't doing the job, their job the way that Tom wanted it done, or they weren't putting out their best ability. It came mostly from hourly people.
Oh, yeah.
But I found him to be another guy that was, he was a rough talker, and you never had to guess what Tom Spalsbury was thinking.
Because he told you.
He told you. You know, and that's great to work for a guy like that. You know.
Yeah. No guessing.
No guessing. You know, if he's got a problem with you, you know it now. And so, but Tom was a good guy. I like Tom.
Did any of those guys, Dale, were they the kind of guy that if things went well and you'd hear about it, so to speak, the good job side?
Sure you did.
Okay.
Oh, sure you did. They were...
people weren't afraid to pass out a compliment.
Oh, no. And I never had one of them that ever took credit for themselves when it was...
When you did it.
Yeah, when I did it or anyone else did it, you know. They were all pretty... I guess that... I was pretty fortunate in that all of the supervisors there in the press plant were pretty much that way. If you had a bouquet coming, they give it to you. I got it on the other hand.
Sure, if you got a pile of other
Yeah.
stuff, and you got that too.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Well, Dale, we go back to the other side of things. Now, you were now kind of the job setter and what did you call it? Or not
Well, it was
relief
it was
man,
it
not
was
relief man, but
no, I was a group leader.
group leader. That was it.
Yeah.
Okay. And
As a group leader, of course, that was before they started this foreman training program.
okay.
The foreman's training program was a good program because it let me tie the rest of the organization into our little world.
Mm-hmm.
Where when I was on job setting, all I knew was what was happening in the press plant.
Yep.
I had no idea the problems and the workings that was going on in the paint plant, who worked very closely with
Well,
the
you
press
could just
plant.
about throw a stone at.
Yes,
Yeah.
and beyond that, if we didn't punch a hole right here, the problems it would give final assembly,
Mm-hmm.
we'd hear about it, but we really didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Once they started this foreman training program, what would happen was we would go to school, and I'm thinking like I think we did classroom work
Okay.
for approximately 6 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and then we had 6 weeks of on-the-job type training.
Okay.
We would spend a week in the ivory tower over there watching them hire in people and seeing what they did at the hospital and the doctors
All right.
did, and accounting and all of this
Mm-hmm.
thing, and where they, and the purchasing and this type of thing. We'd spend a week in the engine plant. Sometimes on working right on the line,
Oh, really?
not necessarily as a like I would go in and report to a foreman in the engine
Yeah.
plant through the upper management
Sure.
of the engine plant. He would stay there a couple of days with me, and they'd put him on special assignment. The rest of the week that you was there, you'd run his department.
Okay. So you used
So you
to.
got a feeling
Yeah,
of
all right.
he would be there every morning
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that you got started all
Mhm,
right, and then he'd take off for the day
Mm-hmm.
and do whatever management
Okay.
had for him. The same thing would happen on final assembly or the axle plant
Mhm.
or wherever that assignments were.
And all of you guys that were going through that program did that. That
Yes.
wasn't specific just to you.
No, it was everyone. Everyone in
did
the
that.
foreman, everyone
All
that
right.
you saw in this
Yeah.
in these pictures
All right.
earlier, and did the same thing. And there was several classes of them. I don't know if they're still doing it or
Yeah.
not.
Okay.
I
Well,
don't
was
know.
that program, was that the first time it was being used, or had that been used prior?
It had not been used. It started about the time that I started being a group leader,
All right.
and I did not get in. They took one class, started it, and about the time that finished, they started class number 2,
Mm-hmm.
and at this time, this was when the old F-85s they were getting ready to go with that.
All right. So that was
59
61.
and 61, yeah.
Mhm.
They knew that all of this
Yeah.
this was coming up.
Yeah.
And so then that's when they put class 3 and class 4 started
Mhm.
at the same time.
Okay.
They had different instructors,
Yeah.
but they were all going to school at the same time.
But this was then sort of in the early infancy stages of
yeah,
this program.
this was the first ones of the
Mhm.
program, and
Okay.
it worked out. Everyone seemed to be pretty well satisfied with it.
Mm-hmm.
The nice thing about it, if they sent me up to your department, and I spent a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was with you, you observed my interest, my type of management, say for instance, for supervising. If I was working smart, this type of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, you made a report on me.
Mm-hmm.
When I left your department, you sent a report back to the head of the class there, and
Mhm.
they made it a part of my file. So that every move that I made, and all the way through this class, there was no reason at any time that if I would have got washed out of this class because I wasn't doing like I ought to, that I
Yeah.
should have been surprised.
Yeah.
Because if you were being fair to me,
Mm-hmm.
when you wrote up that report,
Right.
and I had a shortcoming somewhere, you would write it in there.
Mm-hmm.
If that was the only time that it showed up in the whole report,
Right.
of all of the places
Mhm.
that I went, well, they could say, well, it might be something in that particular
Yeah.
area
Yeah.
that maybe I wasn't interested in.
Right.
Maybe you and I had a little
Right.
conflict of personalities. But if it showed up in 2 or 3 places,
Mhm.
then these guys would say, hey, here's an area you need to work on. Look here,
Mhm.
when you was
Okay.
here,
Yeah.
here was a shortcoming. It showed up in spot number 2, and it showed up
Mhm.
again in spot number
Mhm.
3. So there's something you need to work on.
Yeah. Okay.
And it worked out real well. It was a good program, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's
And
great.
they made a lot of good supervisors.
Yeah.
Nearly all of the ones that were supervisors, foreman, general foreman, and assistant superintendents, while I was in there, were all people that had gone through that program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know what's happening there now. I
Oh, no,
understand that
yeah,
there's a different program,
I'm
but
sure
it's
different, yeah.
that was a good
Okay.
program, because
All right.
all of these people that were taking this were people that were doing the same type of thing that I was doing.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
group leaders
Sure.
back in their home department,
From all over the plant.
and they were from all over the plant. Yeah,
Okay.
right. And
So that's that photograph that we were looking at there. Is that group number 3 or
that was
whatever it
group number 4.
Four,
And,
okay.
there, because they're
That's the
the
one
group,
with the
but
photo.
like 3 and 4 were going at the same
Yeah.
time.
And 3 is the one without the photo.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And as you can see, there's tells where they were assembly
Mhm.
plant,
Okay,
diagram,
kind of
tool,
their originating
mate,
department,
Yeah.
yeah.
Axle, that's wherever they originated from. General inspection,
Okay.
wherever.
Well, so now then you got through the school part of things. Then what happened?
Well, I had a chance, myself personally, I had a chance, the last session that I had was in the engine plant.
Mm-hmm.
I had a chance, what was the guy's name that was a superintendent?
Harold Houghton, was he
No,
there?
that was before Harold.
Oh, before Church,
Church.
Louis Church.
Church was
Yeah,
in there.
yeah.
And I can't remember, I'm trying to think of the general foreman's name. Doesn't make any difference. But they had an opening,
Mm-hmm.
and it was in the assembly of the engine assembly
Mhm.
area. And they wanted me to stay there. Well, I was torn a little bit between going on supervision in the engine plant
Mhm.
or going back to the press plant, back to my job setting and group leading
Mhm.
job, or
Mhm.
but as it worked out, just about the time that they wanted to put me on in the engine plant, there was a spot opened up for me in the press plant.
Oh.
So
Okay.
Freeman called me back and said, hey, they'd like you over there, but we would like you here, and
Mhm.
you can have your choice, but we prefer you stay here. Well, I, of
Oh,
course,
sure.
I wanted
Spent
to
so
go
much
back home.
time
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I was a little more sure of myself in the
Uh-huh.
press plant after
Yeah.
that many years in
Yeah.
there, that I stayed. And I went back to the building 34.
Did
It was
you?
my first job site.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
I had the medium presses in there.
Uh-huh.
Then I had the press group where Bill Cahoon was for a while. And then I went down and took over that end group where the baler was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then back to the middle group. They kind of moved around as they had other supervisors come in. And that's when I went to building 52. And
When you got to work for Spalsbury?
yeah, when I got to work for Spalsbury.
Did you excuse me for interrupting again, Dad, did you swing shift at that time, or did
Yes.
you stay on the same shift?
No, we swung shifts every
Okay.
4 weeks.
When you were an hourly fella, did you swing shift,
No.
or did you stay
No,
stuck?
no. Well, we did early when I first went there.
Yeah.
Everybody swung, but
Okay.
then the union got the preferred shift deal.
All right.
So the hourly people stayed, but the
The
supervisors
supervisor
still
swung back and forth.
every 4 weeks. Every
Okay.
4 weeks.
Did that work, so to speak?
Well, it probably didn't work as well as it would if each supervisor would have had his own group and stayed with them.
Yeah.
No two supervisors operate just
True.
exactly the
Right.
same. So you had, every time that you switched shifts, you had to adjust to that group, or that group had to adjust to you, whichever
Right.
was
Right.
happened to be the case. When I was out there, Tom Weibel went out there opposite me, and they were having trouble on. They had a couple of real wild fellas out there that they were good enough guys, but they were young and full of it, you know. And they created a lot of problems out there. And what they needed was a couple of fellas that could go out there, and regardless of who was on the shift, would put them guys in line, and that's what it took. And it wasn't long till we had that place straightened out. It took us a few months, but the one thing about it was a case of where Tom Weibel and I had to work together also, telling where the problems were and pointing them out to them. So there, when we switched shift, there was no surprises.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but it was a challenge. I went from there out to, of course, at that time when I left Building 52, I went out 37.
Because 37 had been built now.
Yes, yeah.
All right.
And they had they moved those big automatic presses in there.
Now, were the cannons ever out there when you were around in that area?
No, they were out there when I was still in Building 34.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about the cannon job at all?
Not too much, other than you know, there was no wall between those two buildings. That was all open, and you could observe what was going on over there.
Yeah.
And I had a father of a friend of mine who was worked on one of the machines over there on the blocks.
The breech block.
Breech blocks.
Yeah.
And he used to machine those, and I'd go over on occasion, and when I'd get a few minutes and chat with him and watch that thing. But I really don't remember that much about it, other than it was there.
It was
know.
there. Yeah.
Of course, you're tied up in your own little world where you are, and outside of just being interested, because it was a different type of operation in there. Yeah. Until they took those cannons out of there and then started moving the presses in.
Yeah.
That's they put over in D Bay, I believe it was, in 37, they put all the automatic presses.
That's that first kind of low bay, isn't it? To the
there's a high bay.
There's two high bays there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this was the second high bay.
All right. Okay.
Because they used all those overhead cranes to put the steel up.
All right.
For those automatic presses.
All right. Okay.
They had I can't think of what the fellow's name was. That was a foreman over there. Got real sick. And what was the problem? Something. Anyway, out of a clear blue sky, bang! I was over there. You know.
Okay.
And they just told me, hey, go over there and take over, because there's no one over there.
Yeah.
I didn't know what presses were in that group. I only knew one or two of the people. I had no idea any of the part numbers I was trying. You talk about a test, that was it. And but as luck would have it, Mac, he's a committeeman, a black fella, and a nice guy, was running the automatics out there when he wasn't on call. And as luck would have it, he and I were on real good relations. So I said, hey, come on over here. Show me, where's this department, you know? Who's working for me? Jerry Shumway was the general foreman. And that bugger sent me out there, and he never showed up. I don't know if he didn't know where the department lines was or not.
Jeez.
But that was and I stayed out there for a couple of years. Well, I think I stayed out there until I went on general foreman. But it was that was a real challenge. Of course, Whitey Liggett, Bob Strang were eventually general foreman in there.
Okay.
And of course, they were both assistant superintendents in there. And what a pair. They were, you talk about two guys to get a job done, there was two fellas that could do it. Personalities, a lot alike. Both of them, again, were people you never had to, and I worked directly for both of them for years, one way or another. You never had to guess what either one of them were thinking, because they both spoke out. Bob Strang probably took his job, no, I don't want to say he took it more seriously. He worked harder at it, than Mac Liggett did. Both good, both effective, two different management styles. Because of Bob Strang's management style, he let things bother him a whole lot more than Liggett, and I think that's eventually what done him in. You know, he was just so hyper.
That type of guy, the type A guy.
And very effective in their jobs, very helpful in the people that work for them. Both of them. They were, and Judd Cordes. Now Judd Cordes.
Okay, Judd came along there somewhere.
Yeah, Judd came in as a superintendent after Bill Freeman left.
All right. Bill retired, didn't he?
Yeah, Bill retired.
All right.
Bill retired. Judd Cordes came in. Judd, when he came over in the press room, had not had a lot of. He had worked for a while as a general foreman in the sheet metal finish area.
Okay.
Where they did all the finishing on the hoods and the assemblies and the fenders. He also worked as an assistant superintendent for a short time. Dick Monroe left, and Judd Cordes took over as the assistant's job.
The nighttime thing?
No, the nighttime thing ended
when Monroe left?
When Monroe left.
Oh, all right.
And so the assistant superintendent and the superintendent were both on the day shift.
Okay.
And your general foreman run the afternoon shift.
Okay.
And every afternoon, when the afternoon general foreman came on, they would go to Judd Cordes, who was the assistant superintendent, and he would get filled in on what was happening today and what was expected to be done tonight. And then written communications had to be left for Judd Cordes so that he would know what happened on the afternoon shift when he went there. And then Judd got, of course, elevated into Freeman's job. Judd, I have seen Judd when he turned purple at things that would happen in there that he didn't agree with. And he had, I've seen him bring and I've been in the group when he's called the assistant superintendents and the general foreman in there when things were happening he didn't approve of. And I don't think anybody that walked by had to guess what was happening. He really was a gung-ho. I guess that's the best way to put it with Judd. A good supervisor, again, you know. But you never had to guess again what this was a style, I guess, of the people that went through there. You never had to guess what they were thinking.
But Judd would let it out.
Oh yeah. I remember one time during a strike, all of the supervisors, general supervisors, assistant superintendents, there were certain things throughout the plant that we were supposed to be doing. You know, like if we had parts of the machinery that might rust while it was down, we were to take some oil.
Oh, okay, yeah.
If we had parts that was in the system that had been washed perhaps through the washer and didn't get hauled away before the people went on strike, we were supposed to get those parts up and make sure they got some oil on them so that they didn't rust. Make housekeeping checks and help the fire marshals and them check and make sure all the fire extinguishers were up to date. Just things to keep us busy.
Sure.
Well, one day they got Bill, or Liggett, Strang, I think Jerry Shumway, I can't remember who else, snuck up and went into the women's camp out in Building 52 and had a card game going.
Oh, okay.
Thinking that Judd was gone, and he had gone someplace. He'd gone over to some upper echelon meeting. And when he came back down through, the motor plant. And he walked right underneath that can, and he heard that they had a guy that was supposed to be on lookout. But him thinking everybody was gone, I guess, I don't know whether he'd relaxed or he'd gone down doing something or after some coffee or something. And Freeman came down through there and he heard that laughing and us slapping the cards.
Yeah, on the table.
He went walking up there. And here's all of his top men that he's supposed to be working for, playing cards instead of down there supervising the little chores that they had for the rest of the guys to do. Well, boy, I'll tell you.
But Judd had a few words about that.
Yeah, it wasn't only about 10 minutes and everybody in that place was in the office. Well, they'd been letting them, our going home time was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, and the guys would start peeling out at 2 o'clock, and he never said anything, you know. But boy, after that deal.
This is a recording of Dale E. Wilcox of Zephyrhills, Florida. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center on January 27, 1989. This is tape number 2 of 3 tapes.
Okay, back to the Judd Curtis story.
He told everybody, he said, I've been pretty good to you guys, and I'm going to let you get out of here early and kind of do your thing. But he said, I thought you were doing the job for me, and I found out that you weren't. And he said, so every afternoon at 3 o'clock, I want to see every one of you marching by this office on your way out of here. He said, I want to see you when you go. If I don't see you, you better have a good excuse tomorrow when I see you. Among other things.
Did they do it?
Oh yeah. Oh, you bet they did.
Okay.
That's one thing about he was hot. Did you ever know Bob Levi?
Yeah, a little.
Bob Levi was the type of guy that real dry humor. Always could see the funny side of everything. And I've seen him set in meetings. Bob was an assistant superintendent in the finish area, or excuse me, a general foreman in the finish area down there in 37. And he was the type of guy that would tell somebody if you got a little cut on him, you know, now what do you want to go to first aid in? Pick up a little of that dry ride off the floor and slap it on there and stop that bleed and get back to work. Being funny about it, but that's the type of, you know. And in meetings, something would strike him funny, and he'd break up the whole crowd, you know, with something he'd say. That was the time that this deal after the card play, and I think Bob Levi was in on it too. Everybody commented on it afterwards. But that was one meeting that they had with Judd Curtis in that office that Bob Levi never, I don't think he even took a deep breath. He knew he better. It wasn't the time for something to be funny.
No big joke.
No big jokes. But again,
sure.
Judd was a good guy to work for. But again, he wanted people to do what was
he
expected of them. Yeah. And of course, I think during that strike time, and I don't remember now, it was probably the last one they had, when they had anybody off. It's pretty hard to get very serious about anything when you're coming in, you're crossing that picket line every day, and, nothing really going on in the plant, and you knew they were making things to keep you busy. And it wasn't that he cared, I don't believe, that anybody played cards during lunch hour, but it really griped him when he thought that those guys were down there doing what he wanted them to do, and then found that they weren't. But he didn't take just them to task, though, because he knew that we all knew what was going on, you know. And so he had every supervisor in the press plant in that office at that time when he had that thing. And so everybody walked on tippy toes for a few days around Judd.
Well, now let's see, Dale. You got to be a general foreman.
Yeah.
Then what happened?
Well, Bob Strang, as you recall, had a heart attack.
Yep.
And went off. Had to retire. And I took Bob's place as an assistant superintendent.
Okay. That was about when? Read your LFA.
Yeah. There it is, right there. February 1st, 1979.
All right.
And I stayed on that job until can't remember. I'd have to go back now and look, but over a year and a half.
Okay.
And then they had a big shake-up in the whole system, and they brought some fellas out of 40 down and placed them around in the plant. And can't remember the guy's name. Came down there and took my place, and I went back to general foreman.
Yeah, that wasn't Benazet, was it?
No, that was Benazet. I never knew him.
Okay.
He didn't come down there
That
last.
was later. Who would that have been? Roger Budzinski.
Roger Budzinski.
That's it.
Roger came down there, and I guess Roger was only there a year or so after I retired, and he quit.
That's right, he did. Yeah.
But Roger was having a problem down there even before that. Not because Roger was smart enough, but he didn't have the floor experience that it took, you know. And although we tried to help him, I knew I wasn't that far away from retirement.
Yeah.
And it didn't really surprise me when I heard he'd left.
He left, yeah.
And then it was right after he left that I heard that they had like 5 assistant superintendents in there when they.
Yeah, that's when they had Benazet and so forth.
Yeah,
came to pass, I think. Yeah.
See, now I didn't know this Benazet or any of these other guys that were in there. Vic White took Mag Liggett's place when Liggett retired.
Yeah.
And so I worked with Vic for a while, and as an assistant superintendent, and then when I got cut back on that shake-up, Roger came down, and I went back to general foreman, and that's what I retired at.
When did you retire, Dale?
In June the 1st of 1981.
Okay. Now, the plastics business, we didn't talk about that much, but that kind of all sort of happened during all that period of time while you were down there.
Right. I kind of got in on the ground floor of that plastics business. I was a general foreman at the time, and when they started putting those plastic machines in there. And at that time, I had moved back out to building 52.
Oh boy, you're in the middle of it.
And so I kind of watched them put them in, and I got into it kind of gently. As you recall, remember when they brought 2 machines in there to begin with.
Okay.
A small one and a medium-sized one. Well, rather than to set up a new department for 2 machines, they just kind of passed that over to me. And eventually, of course, that worked into all of 52 worked into plastics. And
What do you remember about the what I'll call the infancy of all of that? What happened?
Well, I think
what
it
kinds
was
of things were going on.
I always used to believe, and I guess everyone else did, that plastic was plastic.
Mm-hmm.
If you could make a filler plate out of polypropylene, why couldn't you make everything out of polypropylene?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you have to have? It was a big shock to me to find out, even in the beginning, that there was 5 or 6 different types of plastics to use for different applications. And it was kind of everyone that went into it along with me had all been metal people.
Yeah.
And after you've spent 20 some odd years in metal, it's pretty hard to think that somebody can squirt a little plastic into a mold and do something better than you can with a piece of metal. So it was a new experience. It was a learning experience. We met a lot of interesting people from the outside. Owens Corning, suppliers of the plastics that were anxious for us to really make the process go.
And because they were supplying materials.
They were supplying the materials, and they knew, because they were in the business from the start, what it could do.
Was there what I call resistance or resentment or that sort of thing with the change that was moving, or not?
There might have been a little bit at the first. It's hard to say. I think we all made a little bit of fun of it.
Yeah.
When the first 2 machines come in, what can that thing do that we can't do?
Yeah.
But the more you got into it, then it got to the point of where, as the more machines come in and they set up a department for it, then they said, hey, now look, this isn't working trying to work metal and plastics. We're going to have to set up this plastics department so the people that are working in the plastics can get the metal out of their head and go to plastics. And that's when I moved over there, and fortunately they gave me some good supervisors. I had Ron Babbitt, Dave Adams, who were eventually made general foreman. Clyde Harrison, guys that were really interested in the plastic system. And as a supervisor, you know that the better the supervision that you have under you, or working for you, the easier your job is. And so I was fortunate enough to have those type of fellas working for me at that time, that got into it, that were interested in it, and that's what it took to get that plastics department and make it what it is today. Really,
there were a whole different set of problems, weren't there?
Yes.
From one to the other?
Yes. You used to take a die for press. If you got a little bloop in it somewhere, you could call a guy over and say, hey, grind that spot out of there. You didn't do that with a plastic mold.
Okay.
Especially if it was a part that showed on the car, like your dashboards or your cigarette ashtrays or show parts. And most of those had some type of a pattern in them.
Right.
And it got to be that if you had something happen to those molds, you really had to have them reworked. It was a altogether different ball game in your thinking when it comes to the molding, or the molds themselves. You had to remember that you were working with 100 degrees temperatures, hundreds of degrees temperature, depending on the plastic that you were using. So you had other dangers to think about other than just throwing a piece of metal in a press. You know, you had to make sure that your seals were all good, and that You weren't going to squirt that out onto somebody, and that did happen a time
did
or
it?
two.
On
Oh, yeah.
occasion they didn't close
Well,
or something?
what would happen, fellas were supposed to, whenever they backed the nozzle out of the mold for any reason, which shouldn't have been until a shutdown time, they were supposed to purge that barrel of that material that was in there. Because if they forgot to do that, and they had to back that out, and they'd go in there and they'd clean that socket where the thing fit into the mold, where the nozzle fit into the mold, and they'd reach up in there, and all of a sudden this thing sat back there heating all the time, and it would out at them, you know, and they'd wind up with that hot plastic on the back of their hands or side of their face. I've seen guys get some real bad burns out of it. So it was a whole new chain of thoughts as far as safety was concerned.
Was the machinery more dependable than the old pressing? Was it a different kind of machinery?
It was, yeah, where all of your presses, of course, were vertical. All of your molds are horizontal. They run by hydraulics. It was a whole new ball game where your presses, most of them were mechanical. You did have a few hydraulic presses in the plant, but they were a rarity. It was strictly a hydraulic system. So it was a whole new ball game. It really was. It changed everybody's. That's why you had to break it away from the press group. Because it was a whole new group of thoughts and safety ideas, ways of operating.
Did the maintenance guys? Did they have to be kind of split too? So you had guys that...
No, it was surprising. You had, where in the press group, you probably depended more on your machine repair type people. Once the plastic machines came in, you had electronics, so you had to have a good electrician. You had to have a good hydraulics man, somebody that knew valves and the hydraulic system, and plumbers, of course, you know. But you didn't have to have as much machine repair type people. More, the people that serviced you almost immediately becomes a higher grade of service. You had to have, like I say, electronics people rather than just a plain old electrician. You had to have somebody that had electronics. A plumber would do fine if he was sharp on hydraulics. And
now, from an operations standpoint, Dale, like with a press, I guess the guy could make a mistake and he'd get 2 parts in or something, and you could. But that sort of problem would not exist in a plastics machine.
There is times when those machines were set so that if a part is when the mold opened up, cooled down and opened up, ejected the part. If that part didn't fall all the way out, and the mold would come closed, there was a sensor on those that says, hey, you know, this mold isn't closed, so the thing would open right back up again. And it would stay open. And the only way that you could get those things to cycle again was to go over for the job setter to go over and say, hey, maybe the part would have fallen off by then, but he could see that what had happened, and then he could just go ahead and start the cycle again.
Did you have a guy running every machine?
No, they used to have, well, they had job setters, and he used to have probably 6 machines that he was responsible for. Again, he would take care of malfunctions. They had to change the molds in the machines if you were switching from one part to another. They worked in sets of 2, so there would be 2 guys might have 10 machines. You would take machine 1 through 5, and I would take machine 6 through 10. But when it come time for any one of them to have a mold change, the two of us worked together and we changed the mold in any given machine.
All right.
Or if there was something major happening that it required two job setters, and those two guys worked together. And
but generally the machine would sort of run itself.
once it started to cycle, if you didn't have any problems, it could run a full shift without ever being shut off. It would just run in an automatic cycle. They were well guarded and all safety chains, so that if a guard was opened any place, bang, the machine shut off. Right wherever it was in the cycle, it stopped. And so that there was no chance of anyone getting in there. And now the only time that the job setters had a little button-like affair that they could override that safety. They could
like
open a gate. Yeah, a dummy plug. That's what we called them, dummy plugs. They'd have a dummy plug, and they were painted red, bright red. And most of them had a number on them. You'd have number 10, I had number 11. Okay? If somebody comes along and a dummy plug in there, and that's mine, the wrath of God is going to be upon me for leaving that in there and not knowing where my plug is, regardless of how it got there.
Sort of like losing your key.
Yeah, right. And but of course they needed that. They had to have that in order when they were setting these molds stuff. They had to have the gates open. And like you'd be working on the front side, your dummy'd be in the front gate. I'd be working on the back side, my dummy's in the back gate. If I'm going to do something and I don't want you to cycle that press, my dummy comes out.
Okay, so that shuts it right off.
That shuts it off. You can't, there's nothing you can do to that machine to make it run till I put my dummy back in.
Okay.
And again, that's an old safety program. Not only Olds, but of course by that time Asha and all the rest of them had got into it. But it's a good program. It was a good program.
Okay.
And
see, and Dale, you said that sort of started with two machines, a little one and a big one.
Yes.
Do you remember where it kind of got to?
Oh dear, we had, if you give me a minute, I can tell you how many was there when I left.
Okay.
There was 4 in the extreme back row, and then there was 1.
The extreme back, where do you mean?
Clear to the back end of 52.
South side, along the railroad track?
South around the railroad track.
All right.
There was 4 in there, and then they brought 1, 2, 3. There was 6 in the next row.
Okay.
And 6 in the next row.
You're moving to the north as you're coming north. All right.
And
the big ones were in those rows, weren't they? In that middle row.
Yeah, in the big crane bay.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they put, gee whiz, they had 1, 2, 3. They must have had 20, 24, 25 machines in there when I left.
And the biggest one was what was that?
A 2,000 ton.
Okay, which made, what did you make on those?
Oh, filler plates.
Filler plates.
Yeah, filler plates, bumper guards, bumper seals.
Okay.
Rubber strips for the bumpers.
Yeah.
Were all made in those big machines.
And can you remember what your littlest one might have been?
Oh dear, they had a couple of real small ones over there in the back where they'd make, let's see, what some of the small, of course we made ashtrays.
The ashtray doors, those things?
Yeah, ashtray, well, we made the whole ashtray.
Oh yeah, okay.
Made the ashtray doors, glove box doors. Of course we had them where they made the, I don't know if they still make them or not, but all of the components that go around the steering column.
Oh yeah.
So I think of the smallest part we made. That was probably probably the smallest. But filler plates were definitely the largest.
Did that great differences of material that you were using? I don't know how many different kinds you were using at that time, but did that ever cause any unique problems? You get the wrong stuff in the wrong place?
Sometimes your different materials will not mix. They will, you can see almost immediately if you've got foreign material. Now, filler plates were made out of polypropylene.
Okay.
Other things will mix a little bit with polypropylene, but if you get any great amount in there, it messes up the molecular cycle or molecular chain, and the next thing you know, you throw a filler plate out there on the floor and step on it, and it'll break all to pieces.
Okay.
And you've got a lot of parts like nylons where you're making little bearings or
little gears
or this sort of thing that you need for strength and self-lubricating type things that just definitely would not mix with any other materials. And yeah, it caused a lot of problems. We had, when we first started, you'd have someone would change a mold and maybe go from a polypropylene to a nylon, and forget to purge the system before he done it.
Okay.
And he'd run the other system in there, so then you had to wind up making 15 or 20 scrap parts to purge that system out in order to get a good part that was out of the machine. And that stuff that was made out of that mixed material had to be scrapped. It was nothing that you could reclaim.
Could you reclaim the other stuff?
Yeah, if you had a short shot in a like on a filler plate or something like that, that material could be taken to a grinder, ground up, and mixed back in with the new stuff and reprocessed.
Oh yeah, okay.
So it was the scrap material that you got was mostly mixed materials, where you got materials mixed. Used to have a problem with like filler plate. It wasn't terribly important on a filler plate that it be strictly 100% clean. You could have a little bit of foreign material in it and not hurt it, or a little bit
ragged edge or something here there.
If you had show parts that you couldn't, anything that shows on the dash or anything like that, then you wouldn't dare to. Your stuff had to be kept 100% clean. Yeah, a person couldn't come along and sweep up a bunch of stuff off the floor, even though it was the right material, and throw it in there, because if you got a little piece of oil or something off the floor,
you just ruined it.
Yeah, you ruined. No telling how many parts you could ruin with it.
Okay.
It was an interesting job. Again, like I said, I was blessed when I had that area to have good supervisors.
But Dale, take me back to the sheet metal thing, just for perspective. What would some of the typical kinds of problems that a guy or gal would run into out on the sheet metal floor when they were making sheet metal parts, so that people might understand what you would run into?
Probably the biggest problem that you would have in the sheet metal area that I can recall were people type problems.
Oh, okay.
People continuing to run a part off specification.
Like a die gets worn or something?
Yeah, the die might be worn. A ram might have come loose and backed up a little bit, not fully forming a part. A slug in the die, and the person not know it, and run a bunch of parts with that
big dent in it.
Right. Occasionally, you would get bad steel.
Okay.
And when I say bad steel, again, steel, in the making of steel, I guess they probably have the same problems that you have when you make a plastic part. Especially on parts for fenders, hoods, show parts
that took deep draws.
Yes,
and
you had
heavy stretches.
Right, you had to have good metal. You couldn't have metal that was grainy or orange peeled. Once you start drawing an orange peeled piece of metal, it just gets worse. That's all. And it was
Did you ever, like, if you're running slugs and things, would that break dies, or would that happen?
Sure, sure. You take a place where it was very important that you have a good alert operator was on an automatic press.
Okay.
Where you would start with a piece of metal and maybe go through 8 stations before it was finished. And a person doesn't pay attention to see that part's going out every
Swapped
time.
out.
And next thing you know, he's piled 3 or 4 or 5 parts in there and smashed the dial. You know.
Because it just does that.
Yeah. It certainly will. It certainly will. I guess they had hydraulic presses that come on a little later down the line that, especially that were smaller, that would detect a second or third part in there and shut itself off, which would be a great asset. I don't know if those were built into the dies. That was stuff that was coming online after after I left the metal end of the business. But yeah, you could. I've seen them. I've seen them pile 2 or 3 parts into a machine, huge parts, and you would just wonder how in the world anybody could miss the fact that they were 2 or 3 parts. Maybe a punch would break or something, and carry the part to the top. And that was the only excuse that he had. He didn't see the part go out, but he didn't see it on the bottom die where he was loading it. You know, because you always load into the bottom die. Next thing you know, he's got 2 or 3 of them piled up there for he finally wakes up that hey, something isn't right. You know.
You know, the mechanical press just comes on over.
That's right. There's no way that after you put even a double in a machine, that the part is going to be exactly right without some kind of an adjustment on either the die or the machine, the press. And so it was but the biggest share of those type of things that happened were people type problems rather than, and again, I guess the second most would be bad metals.
Okay.
You know.
Dale, in your perspective of things from the sheet metal side of things, did the technology change much while you were in that period? Did we change our methodology, our approach, or how we made sheet metal parts?
Well, they got into when I went there. Of course, every operation had a man on it.
All right.
In the early years, they brought a few robots in. Would try them for a short period.
Okay.
Would try them for a short period of time, and due to production schedules, wind up putting them back in the corner. And nobody wanted to mess with them because
because we couldn't make them work. The robots wouldn't do the task.
Yeah. I think they would have, but we didn't give them a chance.
Okay.
You know.
So
we weren't dedicated enough to doing it. That was the whole secret.
All right. We'd rather throw a man at it. So to speak.
Well, sure. I'm the guy out there on the floor that's got to produce 200 sets of fenders for the final assembly today. Okay. And if I've got an automatic arm in there that's not letting me do that. You know that I'm not going to have much patience with it.
Yeah, right.
So the next thing you know, I've become very disinterested in that piece of automation, and I want that out of there. I want something in there that I know is going to let me produce. And even if you got an engineer down there that was truly gung-ho to get that thing made, he got fought from all sides if he didn't just go in there and took off because, well, you know, production is production.
Oh,
That's what made the money, you know.
Yeah, right.
And so in the early years, people just weren't dedicated enough to that type of a system.
Okay.
Eventually, before I left the metal area, they were installing the automation on the hood line.
Okay.
I don't know if they ever truly got the thing going, but they eliminated about half the people between the presses, so that they only had to have one man on there when before before even I left metal. The arms and the conveyors and the conveyors were set so that so that they'd load right directly into the presses and this sort of thing. But even early on then, again, if those things were put in there and didn't take right off, the next thing you know, if you didn't watch it, that automation was gone there because, like I say, people people weren't oriented enough to. No one in upper management, and I'm going to say from the assistant superintendent right on up, ever was dedicated enough to say, hey, that thing is going in there and it's going to work, or you're going to be here 24 hours a day to get those parts out. You know, that's the type of philosophy that we needed early on to get that thing going. Once we got someone up there that said, hey, this is the way it's going to be, or that's what's going to happen, look what they've got in there today. Arms and robots.
I was curious about that.
But early on, it was just a lack of dedication, and I'm just as guilty of it as everyone. It was just it wasn't. I'm not pointing any fingers.
No,
it was just a general attitude of everyone in there. You know. I remember on the valve cover line down there, they had a robot arm come in there. You take that out of the draw press, take it around and put it into the press where it would trim it and trim, flange, and pierce in the second operation. They put it in there, and it worked good for about 4 hours, and some little thing happened to it. And you know, that thing for the next 3 months was in and out of there. They spent more time putting it in and out than they did running it. Guy'd say, hey, got to have those valve covers. Pull that thing out of there. So they'd put it out, put a man back in there. He'd transfer. They'd say, well, okay, we got the problem fixed. They'd move it back in. And eventually, I think Judd Cordes is the one that finally told them on this, hey, if that thing will work for 4 hours, it will work for 8 hours. And no one is to monkey with it or adjust it unless somebody knows something about it, you know. And that was probably the first piece of automation that they put in the press room that I can recall that really took off and worked, and it worked good.
Was part of it, Dale, because we didn't really have people that were knowledgeable on how to maintain those things and keep them working?
I'm sure that was part of it, but again, you see, Jim, that was strictly a management type thing that we weren't dedicated to do it, you know? We weren't dedicated to do it. Once they become dedicated to do it, then they sent these guys. They took this smart little electrician down here that was pretty sharp on things and was interested. They sent him to electronics school. They sent him to the company that made that arm, and so that they could teach him what he needed to know about it, you know. And as soon as those things started happening, we were putting the cart before the horse sometimes, you know. If you can't put a piece of machinery in that no one knows anything about, and once we got our priorities set, and people said, hey, we're going to make them go, then they started going.
Well, that's kind of on that'll all be, that's kind of the forefront of the changes that were occurring in that era. So
yes,
that's
right.
That insight is interesting.
Now, you take on that hood line, as I recall, they used to have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, I think 13 men on that line. And I think probably running it with about 5 now, or maybe less. One man on each machine. They were eventually, and maybe they have, going to have it so that there would only be the one man on the draw, or the guy that's feeding the blanks in. And their aim was to then have the 2 men on the end that took it off and hung it on the line.
How did the hourly folks view all of that sort of thing, Dale? Did they have a different perspective on it or not?
Well, I think they kind of had it with mixed emotion, because the big thing that any time that you heard about automation, and I don't know if it was propaganda put out by certain people, or if we were all involved in it, was, hey, for every piece of automation, there's going to be a man that's going to be missing. You know, he's not going to have a job. And so, yeah, I suppose that was especially with the elderly people, it was, yeah. You know, they weren't really dedicated to make it work. Why should I watch this piece of machinery and make sure it's going to work all right if it's going to take my job away from me, you know?
From your perspective, did that really, quote, take away people's jobs, or?
No, I think from my observation, it took jobs from certain areas, but wound up putting them someplace else.
So it just transferred sort of the knowledge required.
Yeah, you take the fellow that was running a line, didn't have to know anything really, except how to load a piece of metal in there, you know? Anybody could do it, a guy with a first grade education.
Sure.
Okay, you took him away, and took the man next to him away, but you may have to put 2 electronics men in there. So it just upgraded the type of job that it took to do it, you know?
Created a need for different kinds of folks.
That's right. It just created an upgrading of jobs, really, it does. It was more important that you have a thinker in there rather than a
doer, so to speak.
Right. So, from the time that I left there, I never saw a piece of automation that actually eliminated a man as such. It may have eliminated his job on this line, but he was always went to work someplace else.
Transferred the problem to somewhere else.
Right. So I suppose a well-automated plant, you might be able to run with less people, but you've got to have a better grade of people. I'm sure of that. You've got to have people that are thinkers, people that are, like I say, electronics men, hydraulics men, this type of thing, that are more skilled type jobs. The average run-of-the-mill peon type job, so to speak,
they were going.
Disappear.
They were leaving.
Right.
How about the SMC side of the house, Dale? Were you involved in any of that at all? That's another kind of
that was
evolving thing.
When they started the SMC, I always said that's what put Bob Cook in his plant manager's job.
Okay.
He was he wound up as a vice president?
General manager.
General manager. He was plant manager at the time, and he was the guy that insisted that SMC go.
Okay.
When they started that up, what year was that?
Must have been
70 something.
Oh yeah,
70,
middle 70s or somewhere.
No, I think it was early 70s, because 75, 74 maybe, 73 even might have had some front end panels on it.
Okay.
But when Bob Cook committed to that, they played with it for a couple of years. And then he said, hey, we're going to go with it. And we had a horrible experiences with that. In the molding, it was, of course, again, a whole new process. We made our own material out there.
Back in 34,
we brought that glass in, as you recall, in big balls, which they still do, I guess. Run it through choppers at the length that it required, 1-inch lengths or whatever. Sometimes you changed it for different parts. But once they started on that one front end panel, you made your own materials, took it out, had a maturation room where it had to mature and age to a certain point. Take it out in those big rolls, run it through those presses, and we had a terrible time molding it. Then we'd go down to the other end and we assembled it. Well, Bob Cook came in and he told Judd Cordes, he said that thing was going to go. Now he said, I want you to put a couple of men on that project. His men, in other words, production
folk.
And you keep them here as long as you have to keep them here to get that job done. So what happened was, Lillian will remember better than I can the years. I started along in late August, getting ready for running the new model run. Mac Liggett was an assistant superintendent. I was a general foreman. Mac Liggett come in at 6 o'clock in the morning and worked till 6 o'clock at night. I came in at 6 o'clock at night and worked till 6 o'clock in the morning. I had Bob Cook's home telephone number in my billfold.
Oh my goodness.
And he told Liggett and I, he said, "You got any problems? If these engineers don't get you what you need to do the job, a repairman doesn't do the job for you, anything happens that this thing isn't moving, you call me." Never had to, but
Yeah.
that was, oh, you talk about a good club. I remember one time we were, of course, when we first started down in the assembly area, we did everything by hand. Makeshift air suction things to keep the ventilation to keep that out. You remember what a horrible time we had with that?
Oh, that dust was terrible.
Yeah. And people wore dust masks. I used to go home in the morning, and I carried a blanket and stuff in the car, and throwed it over the seat, and I'd go home and I'd go in the back door. And you took a couple of steps up to go to my kitchen or down into the basement. I'd stand right in that doorway and strip my clothes off and throw them to the bottom of the stairs. My wife would pick them up, put them in the laundry. Just, the dust was unbelievable.
The itching and all, didn't people get?
Oh yeah, we had a
itching?
terrible time with people itching and breaking out in a rash from the fiberglass. We got them creams by the case, and finally we got to where people would, as soon as they'd come onto the job, grab a tube of that stuff and they'd smear it on their arms, and their necks, and their face and every place else. And let that dry for 10 minutes so that it was just a protective coating that they used. And everything, there was nothing automated over there. You had all hand tools. All hand tools. You filed out holes with files. One time we used a lot of rat tail files. About, the largest point of them was probably as big as my little finger down to like a pencil point at the end. And we went through those things like you wouldn't believe. And I come in there and I'd worked a couple hours one night and went down to the crib to get some files because they just eat them up, you know, that fiberglass and stuff.
It ruins the file.
Yeah, they'd fill up and we'd break them and the crib, it was out of.
Oh, goodness.
And I said, well, you know, we gotta keep going. So you're gonna have to get me some of them. And I said, who buys them? Who gets them? And he got his little card out. He said, well, here's the guy you're supposed to call. So I called up there, and I just, luck would have it, up purchasing, I got a hold of somebody up there. And I told him what I had to have and the number and who I was supposed to contact. Well, he isn't here. Well, I said, if I can't get a file, if someone doesn't have me some files here shortly, or I don't get some answers from somebody, I'm going to have to call Bob Cook. And so I left the office and went back down at that area and was pushing, and people were doubling up with their files and everything else. And it didn't seem like I'd been down there 2 minutes, and here come a guy with a whole head full of files.
I'll be darned.
I don't know where he got them, but someone said that he'd gone down to...
Probably went to Myers and bought them, so to speak. Mill Supply.
Mill Supply Company. They'd gone down there, and they were closed, but he got a hold of somebody that went in and got them for him. They had them on order and through Mill Supply, and Mill Supply had them, but they hadn't delivered them.
Brought them in.
They got them. But that was one good crutch that I had. Anytime I wanted anything, hey, here's Bob Cook's number.
Yeah.
I'll just have to
Yeah.
call him.
How long did all of that mess
I
go
worked
on?
from mid or
August-ish.
August until the first day that I had off was Christmas Day.
I'll be darned. So you went that whole 4 or 5 months in
Yep.
there.
7 days a week,
Yeah.
12 hours a day.
Yeah.
The hourly groups were working 3 8-hour shifts.
But
And
you
the
two
foremen were working 3 8-hour
But you
shifts.
two guys had to kind of
Yeah, but
overlap
they wanted,
everybody.
yeah, they wanted to make sure that there was somebody with a little muscle in there
Yeah.
around the clock.
Yeah. Well, were the molds and that side of the house working
Well,
correctly, so to speak?
I think
or?
probably, but again, we were all in a learning process.
Yeah.
We were in a learning process in making the materials. We were learning process in molding, the things that we needed to do to keep molds clean, make sure that the parts ejected out of the molds without breaking them, in the handling of them, to make sure that when we put them, of course, remember we had to rack everything behind those things.
Yeah.
And every time that you handle a part, you don't help it, you know.
Subject to damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we debated on putting a line in where they could come off the press, they could hang them onto a line and be transferred down there. There were so many things that if you were making a bad part, putting it in the rack, that shift might be gone before, and the next shift would be in there, and they'd get the part, you know, and so you'd be a half a shift or more behind. It was hard to correct a problem unless you were taking it right from the press right down there, and we attempted to do that several times a shift, rather than to make sure that they did get shuttled off to the side someplace.
Yeah. Well, now, in this case, if you made a part that was, quote, scrap, could you grind it up and reuse it or not?
No, that's scrap.
It just
That's
went.
scrap. Yeah. That had to be, they just chucked them and hauled them to the landfill.
Okay.
Break them up, you know,
Yeah.
so that they,
Yeah.
anytime, that was the big problem with that SMC when we started out, and probably is today, is that there was no salvage to any of it. Once it was scrapped, it was scrapped.
Okay.
We did learn to make many major type repairs on it
All right.
that would salvage it. The big problem that we had was on, again, on surface type.
Or it had to look good.
Yeah, right, like over the headlights, and of course that was a showy part anyway.
Yeah.
If the repair was something that you could make on the underside or even on the surface, and we got pretty good at some of those small cracks and stuff like that that we could fix, that would never show again after they were painted. But there was just too many parts that had major defects in them that there was no way you could fix them. Blister, a part would blister on those, you know, because that was a blanket type material when it was put in there. And if the air didn't escape out of it when it was being molded, you get it out of here, and here's a blister anywhere from the size of a dime to a silver dollar. Some of those could be repaired, and we had people that were very efficient at repairing some of those things. But oh my, what a headache. But I think that once that thing finally went over and started going, that kind of set a pattern. Well, nobody in the industry was doing it.
No, as I remember, we were plowing a lot of new ground there.
Yeah. Ford and other car companies even started using it after we perfected it. They had, I remember once after, later on in the year when things began to run more smoothly and we got a little bit sanity back into the place. They used to let people from other car divisions and other type of people come in there and watch the operation.
Show off a
Which,
little.
yeah, well, it made us pretty proud
Yeah,
because
sure.
we worked terribly hard at it.
Oh, yeah.
But in all the time that I was in that area, I was never satisfied with the scrap rate on that. It was just never got real good. I don't know if it's any better today or not. I hope that it would.
Either. I can remember trucks, though, by the huge truckfuls of that
Yes.
stuff heading for the dump. Just full.
The only place it goes to landfill.
Yeah.
And that stuff, I suppose that'll be around.
For 1,000 million years, probably.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Our ancestors a couple of thousand years down the road will come and start
Wondering what all this stuff is.
These archaeologists, they get stuff. Oh, what did they use those things for?
Right. Well, okay, so that was kind of a new era, so to speak.
Yes.
And much different for a sheet metal man.
Oh yes, it certainly was.
Did you have to, Dale, just kind of back to what I'll call the dust problem, did you have to be selective on the people you used? Were some people less susceptible to problems, so to speak?
Yeah, but we didn't have a terrible. I was really surprised, as dirty as that was down there. We never had a real major problem early when we were really having when everybody was gung ho to make it go.
Yeah.
It was after things began to run more smoothly.
Is that right? Oh.
And the more improvements that we made in the system, the more bitching that we got about it, because they knew we could do better, we knew we could do better, and they did do better, but it just took time. It was something that at the time that we were trying to make it go, we just didn't have the time, we didn't take the time to help that area out like we did. Remember, later on we had the ventilated tables and the dust collectors and the whole works. That was really nice down there. No more masks, and people could work there all day, and if they wore one of those little cotton aprons and took that out and shook it out, and they were all done for the day. They didn't have their clothes weren't all dirty, and that was one area that everyone should have been real proud at what we accomplished in the length of time that we accomplished it. We would have all liked to see that health situation or that dust collection system going a lot earlier than we did, but we did quite well by it.
Well, someday people will understand pioneering in the plastics world, so to speak, which is what this really is. This is that's what that's all about.
It was quite a time. It took a lot of hard work by a lot of people.
And I suspect over that period of time, probably a lot of people thought, gosh, will we ever get through this mess? Was this ever going to work? Typical of new processes.
Well, and when it got to the point, I know on my own personal thoughts on the thing, I'd get home at like 7 o'clock in the morning, depending on how much time I'd got to talk to Liggett and the boss and whoever else was around that wanted to know something. Get showered, cleaned up, and drop into bed. And the next thing you know, my wife would be saying, "Hey, it's time to go back to work again. It's time to get up. Get up, time to spend an hour with her, and
sort of like you did. Life.
Well, you didn't have any home life at all. There was no home life
work,
at all.
Sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep.
And
it was 7 day a week sort of thing.
7 days a week. 7 days a week.
Really grind out.
Yeah.
Takes a lot out of a guy.
Yeah, it's a good thing I was young and healthy then. But I was, the one thing I guess that I've not heard anyone that worked for Oldsmobile, and especially Oldsmobile, that didn't say that they were pretty well rewarded for what we did. Really we were.
Yeah.
We think we had it tough lots of times, and we did.
Oh, sure.
We did.
At that moment.
But that was our job.
Yeah.
That's why they were paying us good.
Yeah.
And I think of myself in my position now, to get out of there as early as I did, as young as I was. And we do the things that we want to do.
Sure.
And
Sure.
it all falls right back to the rewards that we got for the work that we did
Oh,
in
sure.
Oldsmobile. You know,
Yeah.
that's a great. And all the years that I've been out of Oldsmobile, I can honestly say that I've never been back in the plant since the day I left.
Mm-hmm.
I've never once missed the work. That's the people that you miss.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Those relationships that
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
with individuals.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
You know, when you work in a plant 30 plus years, you just, or a lot less even,
Yeah.
you get to know a lot of people.
You sure do.
You know, you could become associated with a lot of people, and so it's always good to see people.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well,
I just got off your.
No, that's
what
all
you
right.
had
That's
over.
great, Dale. That's great.
That's just a little testimony
Yeah,
on my
sure.
part, but I feel that way, and
Yeah.
I've heard others say the same
Yeah,
thing.
and it's true. And it's true.
So
I don't want to shut you off, so to speak, but any other what I'll call happenings during that your career there that I haven't tried to bring out?
no,
or
not.
that
I
we
think
might have
that's
missed.
pretty well covered it.
Kind of unique.
No, I don't believe so. I think that pretty well covered my area. We've seen a few tragedies and a lot of happiness. You know, that press group was especially that press room group, press room and plastics, was always a pretty gung-ho bunch. They all worked hard, and if any one of them was in trouble, they were all in trouble until he was out of trouble. They worked hard and they played hard, but we had a lot of good times together too. You know.
Sure.
And so I think about Ed Jeske at the time that he lost his arm in a press. When he climbed up into a gas tank automatic press while the operator was
Still around him.
the operator had gone to the restroom. And Ed was running the trim press, and he discovered that there was a little piece of scrap up on the thing. Instead of pulling a plug or shutting off the machine, he climbed up in there and proceeded to take the piece of scrap out while the young fella came back to run the automatic, and not seeing him in there, started the cycle, and of course Ed lost his arm.
Poor guy.
Another fellow lost an arm setting dies. Got setting some of those big dies and put himself in a position that he shouldn't have put himself into, and the die swung a little sideways and pinched in between the die and the.
Of course, you got a big heavy weight.
Yeah. And once it hits, it's just a shearing action, and so it's as good as our safety program was. It seemed like every time that someone got hurt down there, especially in the later years, it was a case of poor judgment on somebody's part. The safety angles were all there to be used. The tools were there to use, and if they didn't use them,
It's like leading the horse to water.
It seemed like just like Ed there, he could have opened the guard. If he'd have opened the guard up,
Just shut off.
he'd have shut off. He had the opportunity.
Wilcox of Zephyrhills, Florida. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center on January 27, 1989. This is tape number 3 of 3 tapes.
It just seemed that every time that I can recall that someone got injured on the job, it was because, not because the safety tools weren't there, it was because that they didn't use what they were supposed to be using, or they tried to outsmart the safety equipment. And,
Poor judgment, or those kinds of things.
Right.
And, but in retrospect, wasn't it still a reasonably safe place? I mean, you didn't have that many of those kinds of problems.
No. You see, I can. That's what I was just thinking. I think in the press area, as far as there may have been others but I don't recall only those 2 incidences where there was
in all those years.
I saw some heroics in there one time on a fender line. A young fella started to cycle his press, and he saw that the panel wasn't right, and he got off the buttons and he reached in and shoved that panel back onto the die, but in the meantime
it
the top down and closed on his hand tight enough so that he could not get his hand out of there.
Oh my God.
The foreman of the die setters at that time was Dutch, what was Dutch's last name? Can't remember, it doesn't make any difference. No. Dutch immediately, everyone standing around wondering what they ought to do.
What do we do?
What do we do? And before any of the top supervisors could get out there, outside of the fella on the floor, Dutch comes out and unplugs everything. Okay? He took and he blocked up between the 2 dies, upper and lower half of the die, so tight that there's no way it could come down any further.
It couldn't drift.
Then he proceeded to go up on the top with one of his men and manually back that big flywheel up.
Oh my goodness.
Until it released that guy off there and freed him, and all he had was a couple of bruised knuckles.
Isn't that something?
You talk about, you talk about heroics, but there was a case that could have been another disaster, but and the nice thing was that you had a man around that had presence of mind enough to know how to get him out of there without hurting him. So
that's great.
But all in all, I had a lot of good years at Oldsmobile. I learned a lot of things. I was well rewarded for my work there, and I always felt that I give them the best that I had, which sometimes wasn't any too good. But
that's right.
Again, you the got to know a lot of good people, and.
Well, that's excellent.
That's great. Good life.
Yeah, that's great, Dan. Take me through your pictures. The first one is that one of your foreman trainees group.
Yes, this was the fellows that were in there. Now there's, like I told you, I've got a list attached to it.
So just help me a little bit on a few guys that you can recognize and kind of where they are.
Calvin Space is right here.
In the front row, second guy from the right. Okay.
Yes, Cal Space.
Yep.
Doug Peck.
Next guy to left.
Howdy Rohrbacher.
Okay.
I can't.
See, who was this guy again?
This was Bob Rich.
Bob Rich is in the second row, left-hand side.
Okay. This was, I can't, these next 2 I don't know.
All right.
Just a minute, let me see. I got a Harold McCoy.
He's the 4th guy over from the left.
Myself.
You're the second from the right in the second row.
In a plaid shirt, and let me see. I remember. I believe that guy was.
Is he on the second page?
There's a couple over there. No, I can't remember. He was from the forge plant. Let me see if that'll help me.
Here's a forge guy right here.
Yeah, that's who that was. Bill Maloney. Okay,
he's the far right-hand guy.
Yeah, that's Bill Maloney.
Okay. Now you're up in the
back
standing.
From the right.
All right.
the first two guys I can't remember.
All right.
And then there was Tom Weibel.
Okay, the guy with just a white shirt on.
Yep.
Okay.
And I can't remember that fellow's name.
Okay.
Dave Slee.
Okay, he's the guy with his arms folded, dark
right,
shirt.
Dark shirt.
Okay.
The next two guys, I don't remember who they are by name.
All right.
Weldon West.
He's in the back looking over the shoulder.
Right.
Okay.
Bill Price.
He's the other guy in the back looking over.
Wayne Tank.
Okay, in the front of those.
What was his name? This guy way in the back, that's Dave Betts.
That's the guy on the far right-hand side?
Far right-hand corner back
with
row.
the tie on.
Yeah, that's Dave Betts.
Okay.
There's another guy named Herman Kruger.
Which one's Kruger?
Herman's the third from the
left in the back.
yeah.
Okay, with the glasses on. Yeah.
The next guy I believe is Barry Moyer.
Okay.
And
who's the far left-hand guy?
let me think what that guy's name was. See if I recognize him by his name. Seems to me he was from no, I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't
That's
remember.
all right.
I think that guy is Jim Ackley.
This is the guy with the dark suit in the middle.
Suit. The guy with the suit on the middle of the back row. I think that was Jim Ackley.
All right.
Where was Jim from? He was from engine plant, no, Army.
Axle plant.
No, that's axle plant.
Yeah.
Engine plant, Jim. No, I don't remember. That,
Okay.
I'm not sure whether I'm not sure on that either.
Well, that's a good start. That gets a lot of those guys.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
Okay.
Set him aside.
And here was the name of the list of guys that was going.
That preceded you apparently, or
well, they were going.
You.
Yeah, it was class 3 and 4 went at the same time.
All right.
And you can see the list there. There was.
So we don't have. There's Dick England.
Yeah, Dick England.
We don't have a picture of that bunch.
No.
But maybe we'll find
someone might have one, like Dave Finnerty, perhaps.
Or maybe Dick.
Yeah, Grimes might have. Les Clute.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Kessel. I don't know where Jimmy is now.
He retired.
Art Luck.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that may
some of those guys
a source. Yeah.
Now this picture.
Okay.
Was taken. I'm not sure when, but Jerry Shumway is
first guy on the left.
First guy on the left,
with the tie and the white shirt. Okay.
The white shirt in the center handing was Bill Cahoon.
All right.
And the fellow he's handing the envelope to is Jewel Carrier, who was a truck driver.
What is he doing? What is the envelope?
I suspect that was a safety award, maybe.
All right.
It was some award that they were giving him.
And you think this was taken down in Building 34
It was definitely in Building 34.
All right. Now,
because Floyd, the blind fella
on the right,
his name was Floyd something, I can't remember.
All right.
And the man next to him in the tam hat there was Mac. He's a welder.
Okay.
And the gal in the front row is Rachel Leverett.
Okay. There's a fair amount of gals I see back in there.
They were the gals that I told you about that worked in the small presses and a small assembly group up there in the north end of Building 34.
So you had quite a lot of women working in those kinds of things.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Basically, if you take a look, of course, this guy he would run an assembly fixture.
Okay, the blind man.
Yeah, and Mac was a welder.
All right.
Arc welder.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
and acetylene welder.
Yeah.
He was a truck driver.
Okay.
He was a job setter, and I think this guy here was a welder.
All right. So all the women were the real operators.
Yeah,
then,
yeah. And some of those heads sticking up in the back I don't recognize, of course, but the biggest share of them that run the machinery and run the production jobs were women.
Okay. And not a real good vague notion of when, huh?
No,
must have been maybe the 60s?
Yeah, it was in the 60s, I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay, here's another one that was probably in the 60s.
Okay. Who you got here?
This is Bill Freeman.
Oh, yes. All right. Right in the front. Yep.
Right in the front with a tie on.
Yeah.
And on the far left was Bill Cahoon again.
All right.
And Dick Monroe
the guy with the tie in the way in the back.
Way to the back.
All
The
right.
biggest man in the group.
All right, so he was your night shift person.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right.
And I suspect this guy's name, all I can remember, his nickname was Hammy.
This is the guy receiving the handshake from Fremont.
Yeah,
All right.
he's handing out a gift that the people had taken up a collection and bought him something
Okay.
for retirement. He
All
was
right.
retiring,
Okay.
and Bill Freeman was presenting it to him for the group.
All right.
And I suspect that this might have been the afternoon shift group because it's a little smaller group.
Uh-huh.
And this guy, his first name was Cliff, and he was a welder.
Okay, this is the guy with the dark-colored suit or clothes on.
Behind Bill Freeman.
Uh-huh. Okay. And these were once again down in 34.
This was in 34. As you can see, the
small
the
press
small
or something,
presses
or
and,
welder or
yeah,
something back
this is
there.
a small press right here, and I can't
Like that
really
might
make
have
out
a
that.
dial machine on
Yeah,
it or
something. Yeah,
Okay.
and one of the little automatic presses or something.
Okay. So this was before Monroe.
Yeah, it was before
Wow.
Moore and Freeman and
All those
guys
people
started.
left. All right. Okay. That's a good bunch there. Now
And
the
then-
colored one.
That
This you
we
thought.
were at a banquet somewhere.
Okay. And this was all the guys that were supervised by Judd? Is that
Yeah,
what it was?
right. It was Judd was. Let's see, Judd was Judd this Bob
Mooney was
Mooney
something.
was a plant manager at that time, and Judd was general
Superintendent.
superintendent.
Okay.
Wilkie Hopkins was
The
superintendent,
black fellow in the back row.
right? And Rex Carter was
Next
a
to him,
superintendent.
to the right. Tony Culp,
Tony
standing
Culp
tall.
was a assistant superintendent under
Wilkie?
Wilkie.
Okay. Let's see.
Bruce.
Kroll. Bruce Kroll. Yeah.
Okay.
To the right again.
Yeah.
And then.
Mac Liggett
Okay.
and myself in the
yourself on
fancy
far
suit.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Cecil Bauer.
Cecil Bauer sitting beside
down.
Judd.
And then Bob Cook.
Right.
Okay. Next to Mooney is this is Carl Johnson.
Carl Johnson. Okay.
And let's see, who's that?
I can't think of his name.
Oh darn.
So we've got those pretty well
okay, I
known.
know that guy too.
Yeah,
but
I do too, but I
I'll
can't think
eventually
of
get
right
it.
now.
And this,
That was taken. I can't remember what it was. It was a banquet for. Oh, it was one of those deals where they had what do they call steak or beans?
oh yes.
One of those
yes.
steak or bean dinners
For
where
recognition, so
yeah,
to speak, for
that's
the year's
right.
work.
Because I got a T-shirt at that time that says I ate steak.
Okay. And some other guys had beans.
Because all of this group, we all ate steak.
Okay.
Of course, everybody ate steak.
Yeah,
but,
really.
But it was because you made the quota on all public production quotas, cost quotas. In other words,
Quality,
we were quality,
Safety, all of that
yeah,
stuff.
right. As an
All right.
overall, and so
Okay.
then of course we had
Yeah.
Bob Cook.
There's the general manager,
Moore.
probably.
Bob Cook, the general manager. He was plant manager.
Yeah. And
General superintendent. Superintendent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
Rex was a good guy to work
Yeah.
for. too.
All right.
Okay.
Now, what else
Now-
have you got photographically in
Now,
here?
take-
Anything?
Is
That's
that
a
anything?
catalog. Sure, we'll take that
Okay.
back. You bet.
All right. I don't. There's a letter in that, by the way.
All right.
And it may tell you why I got that. I don't remember. I didn't really. Like I said, I found that just before.
1967.
Oh, I see.
This is a product of everything. Okay, suggesting
Okay,
that
that
you get a car.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was where they wanted
Yeah.
us perhaps to
Yeah.
deliver cars.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good old Henry Lord. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
67 stuff. All right, so that's a good catalog.
something. Now you've probably got a lot.
Yeah,
of
now I've
those.
got a lot of those, so if you
And I'm
want to
gonna.
keep
I'd
that.
just soon keep that.
Yeah,
if you don't
go
mind.
ahead,
That's a
Dale.
seven-
Yeah, that's
okay.
great. Yeah, that's great.
Now let me see if there's any other pictures.
Well, what's that Mark of Excellence Award thing? What
Well,
is
that was savings bond drive.
Okay. That was 2 of those for 69.
Yeah, I don't know why two,
Yeah, okay.
unless it was for 2 different groups or something. I'm not sure why I
Alright.
got 2.
All right, those were because people.
They were. Remember they had the bond drives,
Yeah.
and if you got like a 90% enrollment from the
Okay.
people under your supervision, you got the Mark of Excellence.
All right. Can I keep one of those?
Sure, sure, you sure can.
Thank
Both
you.
alike. So now there is a,
Okay.
Remember those
there's
little
tour
booklet-
books we used to hand out.
yeah. Now that's an old one.
Okay.
And why I know it's old is because it was one
Well, it's got
back
pencil in it.
back in the back. There's a picture of Dale Wilcox. Oops, hey, wait,
There's a little article too.
Yeah, there. That's what I told you.
Oh, Bill Freeman. Yeah.
I had. What was that? Henry's death, or was that?
The real one. Apologize for Lansing.
No, that was
Steve St. John, Fritz Bennis, Oldsmobile Director, Bennis Cookies. The real Bill Freeman is shown here, but oh, they must have screwed up the picture.
Yeah, that's what it
when
was.
they put it in.
Yeah.
Is that Dale Wilcox right there?
Yeah. That's back in the early. I went on supervision in 1960.
Uh-huh.
So that's probably about a 61.
61
model.
total. Okay.
Because a year or so I was
Yep.
I was still a supervisor out there on the small presses.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that was real early in my career.
All right.
If that's something you can
Sure,
use.
sure.
Okay.
That's at least dates that.
Now.
The 1 million car thing.
Yeah. Now that was. These were supervisors, starting with the right. That's.
Okay.
I can't think of his name. Rex Carter,
Okay.
Bud Thomas, Rudy Masaryk.
Yeah.
What was that little guy's name? I can't remember.
Okay.
This gal was a foreman in training.
Yeah.
That one I don't know. I can't remember his
Okay.
name. There's Bill Beebe, clear back behind the guy, the black guy in the red shirt.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Oh, there's Dale Wilcox, clear to
A
the.
little far left.
Yeah,
Okay.
and from Langsburg.
That's okay.
Can't think of their name
That's
now.
all right.
Well, I tell you, it's been.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Any of these other two guys?
No,
that
I don't
front?
recognize them now. I can't
Okay.
remember what their names were.
All
But
right.
there's a.
Yeah.
That was a picture
That
on the
was a-
1 millionth Oldsmobile in
That
1977.
77 program that we
Yep.
did. That was a lot of stuff.
Now that's just a personal one. I just got thrown in there, but it was a gang from the bowling team,
Okay.
guys that I bowled with.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Set that aside.
Okay, let's see what this is. Oh, these are some of the certificates that I got for different GMI, General Motors Institute,
Okay.
as I was moving up the ladder
Yeah. Sure.
and
Oh,
managing
yeah.
education.
Now you may want to keep those
Yeah, I'll
things so
keep
you
those,
don't
so,
lose
yeah.
those, because those are all.
And this is just another one here.
All right.
Oh, here's an old picture.
Okay.
And I know who these guys are. And
All
again,
right.
this was, I've got written on the back, oh yeah, Jerry Ott,
Okay.
myself,
There's
and
yourself.
Walt Lyons.
And
It was in
34.
Pressburn, 34, but again, it's not dated.
about
But
though.
Again, 62, maybe 63.
All right. Okay.
And I don't know what the occasion was.
All
Maybe
right.
they just thought we was good looking. I don't know.
Well, it was a good picture. All right. You want? Is that all
No,
right?
no, yeah, yeah.
All right. Okay.
Okay, now I don't know. These here, they're just personal. Oh, hey, did you ever see Rex Carter's wife,
No.
Shar?
No. Never
She
met
was a
her.
beautiful woman.
Yeah. Okay. Were these at somebody's retirement or
It
something?
was, it might have been at Rex, no, it wasn't Rex retirement, because he didn't retire after Shar died.
Yeah.
It was somebody's retirement
All right.
party.
Okay.
There's Mac Liggett,
Oh yeah.
his wife. Here's Mickey Ferguson, Dave
Oh, yeah, I remember
Finnerty, and
Mickey,
Helen Passage.
Yeah. I remember Helen.
What was this guy's name?
Oh,
Labor
let's see.
Relations.
Hmm.
Well, I should know him.
I don't recognize.
Dave Adams was here,
Yeah.
and Mac Liggett,
Yeah.
and Mac's wife, but
Yeah.
this guy
I
worked
don't
in Labor
know.
Relations. That was Bob Luscombe's wife.
Okay. Dave Lee in the background.
There's Rex Carter, and I can't think of this guy's name.
Yeah, I can't.
Both of these guys
Yeah.
are. Another one of Dave Adams, and
Uh-huh.
I can't remember. her
Somebody,
name.
some gal.
That's my wife.
Okay. Yeah.
But there's these here
Okay.
were just.
Those are all. All right. Neat.
Now,
You keep those babies.
Yeah,
because those
yeah.
are probably more personal for you.
oh, here's a.
Oops. What's that one that's left here?
Okay, now this has got a picture. It
Okay.
doesn't, probably not too many. I think there's only 2 Oldsmobile people in there.
All right.
And that is Jim Buckley.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah.
And where am I? I'm here somewhere, right here.
Second from the left on the front
And
row.
that was a management concepts.
Okay.
at GMI.
You had a certificate or something from that
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Now this
So
was
that-
a program that they sent folks off to.
Yes, that was again management concepts in '64. That was probably a general foreman type
Mm-hmm.
deal because
right.
I had been on
Oh
supervision
yeah,
a
there's
couple
the
of
date,
years.
isn't it?
Yeah,
April 1st or April to May of
Yeah.
'64.
yeah.
Okay.
And as you see, there's
Geez, they're from all over the place.
yeah,
A lot of Chevrolet people.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Okay. You want to keep that deal, or what do you want to do with
well,
that
yeah,
one?
I'll keep that one.
Okay. All right.
Because really, there's not that really.
Yeah,
isn't
it's
too much
mostly
of-
mostly
Oldsmobile,
your kind of
yeah.
thing. So
And that, I guess,
okay.
there's another thing I found while I was looking around for all this.
This is 1936. What is this thing? A Capitol?
The old
Bulletin?
Capitol Bulletin, Lansing, Michigan.
Oldest and
Now, why don't you take that up there and
All
stick
right.
that in? Now, I don't know. I didn't look through it. Maybe I kept it. Is there
Yeah.
there perhaps is an ad in there? Maybe
I
for
hate to
Oldsmobile.
open it up because they fall apart. So if you
But
want,
it would be better for that to be at Lansing than it would to be at
Yeah.
Zephyrhills, Florida.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. And
Uh,
if it isn't appropriate for us, what we'll do is give it to the museum.
if you would.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we can do that.
And I think.
What are these things you got sitting out here, Dale?
Oh, all right. That.
Oh my goodness, from Rio.
That's an old Rio. Is it a 20 or 10-year pin, maybe?
Yeah, 10. It's got an X
10
on
pin.
it.
I have no idea where I got it or where it came
Okay.
from, but again,
Museum.
that could go back to Lansing.
Okay.
Okay?
You don't
No,
care to
no,
have that.
I don't have
All right.
nothing. I have
All
no.
right, I'll put that in the
It's
museum.
probably something. I used to be a great junk man.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
wife and I collected a lot of
Yeah.
glass and vases and stuff, and I used to go to a lot of garage sales and auctions
Yeah,
and stuff
flea
like that.
markets, yeah.
And I may have picked that up somewhere
Okay,
there.
but that'll be a good agent for the museum.
Another thing, I don't know, there is a pen and pencil set,
That's yours. Your
Yeah,
personal
that's
one.
mine.
Oh, goodness.
but I would just as soon if they would if they would like to show it, you know, if they
Yeah,
it was a 20-year
yeah.
deal, remember?
Yeah,
Written right on
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Now, if it isn't, I'll keep it. Otherwise, it's never been out of the case.
Well,
The
I hate to take that kind of thing away from
well,
you.
it was just something to show, and it's
Yeah,
something that
Yeah,
will never be used. But if it's something that they would use up there and would show, fine. If they want, well,
well,
I'll just keep it.
what happens to most of these kinds of things at the museum, they get put into cases and shown as like this little pin, like
Yeah,
the real pin.
yeah.
They're of the times, representative of the times when
Yeah.
things were done like this. And
That's probably about that must have been 19, I'm going to say 19,
would there be even a date on
71.
that? Maybe
No,
20,
I don't
20
think-
years of service.
it was 20 years.
But that wouldn't be hard to figure out because we know when you started.
Yeah, but you see, that 20-year service is not,
It's not continuous.
it's not continuous.
It's broke
So, yeah,
there,
there's a break in it, but it would have to be 51, 61,
71.
probably 1969 or 70.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
about that time.
Well, gee, what would you like to do with that? Dale? You want to kind of loan it to them? Is that what you'd like to do?
I would,
Or
if they will use it.
they will accept it as a gift if you want to give it to them.
Let's do it. Let's do it, because it's just something that, it will never be, you know, I've got my 25-year ring, and that's the
Yeah,
thing I cherish,
yeah.
you know, and that will come to nothing, you know, really.
Or we
it will
can
be-
keep it in the archives as because we don't have a lot of this kind of thing. It's relatively small, and Helen and I can also keep it there as a thing that would be indicative of the kinds of things which we did then, because we don't do this much
Okay,
anymore.
well, fine, I would
Okay.
rather
All right.
it be in the Olds
That's where we'll
Museum.
keep it
Okay,
there. Yeah.
okay,
All
very
right.
good,
Okay.
all right. And I don't have anything else.
Okay. Well, gosh, that is
Okay,
excellent.
you wanted, now, I was wondering about when I was appointed general foreman,
Yeah.
February 15th, 1968.
Okay, good. So there's a date.
Yeah, there it is.
All right.
Judd Cordes.
Good. Okay.
I don't know,
We've got some of those. A
I
whole
don't know
lot
what-
of
I don't
those.
know what
that
that
was
is
a thing which was put out by one of the magazines that showed a lot of the original cars, and the curve dash is on
Okay.
here somewhere, right there.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
a curve dash.
like I say,
Yeah.
I just found these, so I
Yeah.
really didn't have time to. That's it, I guess.
Okay. Oh
That
gosh,
is it.
that's great, Dale. That is
That
excellent.
is it.
Okay. Now let me just shut this thing off then.